When one makes a list of the most popular comic creators of the last 25 years, you might find the names of guys like Brian Michael Bendis, Jeff Johns, Robert Kirkman, Dan Slott, and then maybe just below that, you'll find Greg Pak.
Pak first popped up writing in the early 2000s volume of Amazing Fantasy, using one of the issues to create a character named Amadeus Cho, who would go on to play a significant role for Marvel in the coming years. Then in 2006, Pak began a run on the Incredible Hulk title with the massive storyline Planet Hulk that saw the Jade Giant get launched onto a planet that was run by an oppressive dictatorship and forced to lead a rebellion. From there, Pak would helm the follow-up crossover event World War Hulk. Then, in the aftermath of that, which saw the Incredible Hulk title get switched over to Hercules, Pak would reintroduce Amadeus Cho to the mainstream Marvel universe, having him team up with the Greek god.
After that, Pak would see his creation Amadeus Cho become a Hulk in his own right, technically known as Brawn, though more commonly known as the Totally Awesome Hulk, and then move on to a lengthy run on Marvel Star Wars comics. He would also do work for Dynamite Entertainment on their Battlestar Galactica and John Wick comic series. After that, somewhere around 2016, Pak would debut a creator-owned series for Dark Horse Comics.
Drawing upon a childhood love of westerns, Pak decided to focus on a unique aspect in the form of the massive influx of Chinese immigrants that came to the United States during the Gold Rush. Pak himself is Korean. Then, to further put his own spin on the idea, Pak would incorporate fantastical elements based on folkloric creatures and various mystical elements of the time period as well.
And that's what we're looking at today. This is Kingsway West.
In 1837, a scientist named Arnold Uhrmacher, aka the Engineer, suddenly kick-started the western expansion of the United States after discovering the existence of naturally occurring red gold.
He discovered a brand of canned tomatoes? I guess people were really into pasta sauce back then.
It turned out that red gold contained mystical energy channeling properties, and the rush not only included American, Mexican, and indigenous people, but also Chinese immigrants as well. After more than a decade of indentured servitude, the Chinese rebelled after discovering a rich vein of red gold in Northern California, leading to a war that lasted the next 13 years as the Chinese fought for independence. Enter Kingsway Law, former top soldier for the Chinese, now traumatized war deserter with a bounty on his head. The fact of the matter is, Kingsway is very, very good at killing people, even when he's not trying to. That being said, when his latest bounty confrontation results in more violence, he himself winds up getting shot and passes out. Kingsway wakes up 13 hours later, having been found by a Mexican woman named Sonia Campos and brought into the neutral territory. She's also a deserter, and the two decide to just forge their own life together in that wild territory, eventually falling in love and becoming husband and wife 5 years later, as they live off the land taking care of themselves.
I mean, maybe they're common-law spouses, unless this bear on this comic panel here happened to perform the ceremony.
While out foraging for wild berries, Kingsway encounters a young woman named Atoy carrying a sword belonging to the Chinese royal guards as well as a dragon on her shoulder. She's looking for Kingsway, but he plays ignorant, claiming that Kingsway Law is dead. However, she's able to track the scent via her dragon and some of his spent shell casings. However, when she calls upon the dragon named Zozo, it just flies off.
Ah, the dragon's a Led Zeppelin fan. That's probably really problematic in this day and age.
The reason the dragon flew off was because Kingsway actually switched his gun with Sonia's, so that's what the dragon is actually tracking. However, this isn't exactly a good thing, as the dragon flying off attracts a group of bounty hunters who begin heading towards Kingsway and Sonia's property. Kingsway tries to rush back home, realizing his mistake. However, once he arrives, the place is burned, Atoy and Zozo have been taken hostage, and Sonia is missing. Atoy attempts to fight back, revealing that she's able to channel the red gold energy in the sword. However, Kingsway arrives and he just begins blasting soldiers away anyway, renouncing a promise he made earlier to Sonia to never draw his gun again. Kingsway's identity now having been revealed, Atoy promises to use her supply of red gold to help track down Sonia's location in exchange for him helping her.
Atoy is part of a group called the Freelanders, indentured servants consisting of Chinese, Mexican, and Algonquin people who are forced to mine for red gold in the ungoverned territories, though they are currently trying to rebel for their own freedom. And yes, I am aware that Algonquin tribes were native to the American Northeast and mostly based in Canada. But there are jackalopes in this thing. I think we have to suspend our disbelief a little here.
However, it turns out that those soldiers were not employed of the Chinese Royal Guard, but rather of Arnold Ermacher, aka the Engineer. He wishes to know where this new rich vein of red gold is so he can claim it for the United States of New York. To help track down Kingsway and Atoy, he dispatches his top tracker, a winged African-American woman named Strode, to see if she can find the two. Back with Kingsway, he gives Atoy a locket that belonged to Sonia so Zozo can try to track it down. The dragon leads them to a Mexican colony town that's already been ransacked and destroyed long ago. The scent seems to run dry just outside the saloon, which means Sonia could have only done one thing.
Now go see Miss Kitty and she'll fix you up with a nice hooker.
The two wind up running into Strode, who demands to know about the red gold, and Kingsway immediately sells Atoy out, only for the confrontation to end soon as the Engineer's forces arrive, and Kingsway gets drawn back into battle once again. He gets wounded another time here and winds up passing out, seeing a vision of Sonia beckoning to him just before he does so. Kingsway begins dreaming of Sonia chastising him for taking up the gun and killing once more, and he tries to justify his actions saying that he had no other choice, but she just turns into a demon and begins clawing at his face. Kingsway then wakes up at the Rio Chino mining camp, home of Atoy and the Freelanders. It's there that an elder member of the camp, Ah Sing, suggests killing Kingsway as he proves to be too much of a liability, though Ah Sing's son Sammy would rather have the gunslinger take out the Wendigo who are guarding the red gold supply and killing any campers who get too close.
I know in most Asian cultures the family name comes before the first name, so when you have Atoy and Ah Sing here, it's possible that they are father and daughter, but Atoy never refers to Ah Sing as either a father or uncle, so I'm thinking it's possibly just a naming coincidence. Also, with the Wendigo, yes, that is technically another part of Algonquin folklore. See the geographic error I mentioned earlier, but I'm thinking this is just because this is one of the parts of indigenous folklore that is translated completely over to the mainstream, so that's probably why they're in the book.
Atoy explains to Kingsway that Zozo lost Sonia's magic scent and more red gold is needed in an attempt to regain it. The one problem is, again, the Wendigo who are guarding the vein. However, Kingsway points out that there's actually a much bigger concern. If the Americans already know about this vein of red gold, then the other factions are probably also aware of it, and they'll soon be on their way as well.
Yes, you have the Americans, the Chinese, the Mexicans, and the indigenous states all sending their militaries to confront the Freelanders. So if you throw them in, you have the Battle of Five Armies.
Kingsway prepares to cut his losses and leave once again, but Atoy pleads with him to stay. If they can hold the battle long enough, then Kingsway can leave and track down Sonia. However, any possible decision is interrupted by a Wendigo attacking the settlement once again, and Ah Sing winds up getting killed as more creatures begin emerging from the caverns. Once more, Kingsway feels a great shame as he's forced to break his renouncement of violence and take up the gun again. It's then that unlikely aid arrives in the form of Strode, who's willing to help in exchange for red gold. Not for the Engineer, but rather for herself.
Yeah, so in this story's universe, slaves that aided the Union in the Civil War were granted red gold-infused wings by the Engineer. However, when they started to do things like demand equal rights, he had them taken away, save for a few like Strode. Now she is working to restore those wings to her people so that they can rise up and get a state of their own.
The Wendigo are quickly defeated, but there's no rest as the Engineer's forces arrive and begin attacking the encampment. Added to that, word has gotten to the other territories and they've begun amassing their forces too. The Freelanders are overwhelmed, and Kingsway, Atoy, and Strode get taken hostage by the Engineer. He tries peaceful negotiations, saying that he doesn't actually want war and was more than willing to cut the other territories in on an equal share of the red gold. Though Strode is more than willing to point out that the Engineer is basically speaking bullshit. However, Kingsway is so willing to haggle, trying to point out that all he wants to do is find his wife. However, when the Engineer leaves to consider Kingsway's offer, Kingsway actually winds up having Zozo free him and Strode. It turns out that he actually has more than enough red gold to track down Sonia, and he prepares to leave again until he spots a Chinese scout on the neighboring hill. He elects to head back to the Freelanders to help them prepare as the Battle of Five Armies is about to begin. Kingsway instructs the Freelanders to lay low as the other forces are attacking the engineers' flying ship, and they then strike at the right moment when attrition begins to set in. Kingsway saves the engineers so the red gold can be used to track down Sonia, and a portal opens up for Kingsway to jump into. He soon finds himself standing in a forest from his dreams. It's then that he spots the grave of Sonia Campos, who died in 1858.
Yes, Sonia was a ghost the entire time. She had been killed in the raid on the village that Zozo had led Ottoy and Kingsway to earlier in the story. And she was so angered by her death that her soul remained trapped on this plane of existence, and she actually rescued Kingsway because she felt a kinship with him.
Now, Sonia wishes for Kingsway to join her in the afterlife, as it's the only way for peace, and the Freelanders are just going to wind up getting killed anyway, as the numbers just aren't in their favor. However, Kingsway has accepted that freedom is the only true route to peace, and freedom must be fought for no matter what. So he elects to return to the land of the living and aid the Freelanders as they flee with the engineer and Strode towards Oklahoma, where Strode's people is settled, so hopefully they can get their wings restored.
And that concludes our look at Kingsway West. How was it? Well, I really like the artwork in this story. I think it's a good Western artwork where it's nice and it's gritty, but it's not overly dark and depressing. It's still got that bright, sun-bleached color to it, that weather-beaten look to the heroes. I think it's got a really good job of capturing that type of feel. And I like a lot of the characterization in this, Kingsway in particular. I think he comes across like a Clint Eastwood-style Western character, in the vein of Outlaw Josie Wales or Unforgiven, that gunslinger that's just been worn to the bone, but keeps getting drawn back in no matter where he goes. And I think the narrative overall is structurally sound. I think there's some good ideas here. Unfortunately, that does lead into the big negative for this book, is I find the lore to be just a little too lacking. Like, I'm getting the ideas, but they're so crammed in that they feel like afterthoughts. Like, again, Algonquin people, native to the Northeast, are now in the American Southwest. I wanted to see more of the Red Gold Rush and all that it created. The conflicts between the Chinese and the indigenous people and the Mexicans and the Americans, or technically the United States of New York, but I'm calling them Americans for the sake of this. It just, it just feels kind of like this afterthought of something, and it, I think there could have made for a more substantive story. And I think that has to do with the length of this. This is a 5-issue series. I would almost extend this out to 8 issues. I think you'd do much better world building throughout that. Again, normally I'm for tightening stories up a little bit, but I think this one just needed to be longer so it could breathe a little bit better. And with that in mind, I am going to be giving Kingsway West a B. Overall, it's not terrible. Like I said, there was a lot to enjoy here, but I can't quite give it the full A because, again, the world building is just so subpar that it holds the whole story back, in my opinion. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, remember you can help support the channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcat productions. There you can request a tray to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. And as always, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.
This era where we see the Red Gold Rush, the Chinese immigrants coming in, the conflicts between the Chinese and the Mexicans, the Americans, the indigenous people. Again, the geographic era... Thanks!